Hey guys, so I'm finally sitting down to do my top 20 books that I read of 2020. I have a wide variety of books, but if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I like to read mystery and horror a lot. But this year I've kind of been open to reading whatever I see is available for free on Audible, so that opens my genres quite a bit. And I've also been listening to what other people have been recommending as well. So let's go ahead and get into the top 20 books that I read of 2020. As a disclaimer, though, all these books did not come out in 2020. It's just the books that I happened to read in 2020. And if you're interested in the 140, I believe, 7 books that I read for 2020, you can go ahead and check out my Goodreads. I have a bunch of books there. I haven't started writing reviews, but maybe this year I will start writing reviews so I can remember my stories a little bit better. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get into this reflection vlog. Okay, so a lot of the books that I read, I'm going to try and categorize them into different genres, but I will save my top maybe 2 or 3 for the end. I haven't quite figured it out. I'm just kind of recording all my feelings on these. So I want to start off with self-help or just personal memoir genre. So one of my top favorite books, so let's just say this is 20, is You Are the Guru. And I talked about this recently in one of my other videos. You Are the Guru is a set of ideas that help the anxious mind. And there are 3 different meditations in there to sort of help you create that space in your life. And I haven't listened to it for a second time, but I'm planning on listening to it and taking notes so I can integrate those ideas more in my life, because I agreed with a lot of the statements that were made, and I just want to have something written out to help me keep integrating those ideas in my life. Anyway, I'm a huge proponent for meditation, and like I was saying, there were some meditations in there, and it was a really helpful book that I really liked. So yeah, definitely read You Are the Guru if you have anxiety issues or anything like that. The next book that is kind of more of the personal memoir was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. And this story was very sad for me, but it was taking a look at my own personal feelings and thoughts after loss has happened in my life. So it was like a memoir of grief, if that makes sense. It created a sense of these feelings are normal. You're not going crazy, basically. So I highly recommend it, even if you are going through loss. So I've lost someone who was, it's been about 5 years now, just a little over 5 years. Still feels like it was yesterday. But the ideas in this book just really hit home for you if you've lost someone, because yes, you try to do anything in your power to actually feel like you have control over the situation. And yeah, so it was a really powerful book for me to read, and I think I only got a small excerpt of it. I think there's a longer version of it, and I might pick it up at some point. It was just that powerful. It was free on Audible, and I was like, Oh, what's this? The Year of Magical Thinking. Oh, not what I expected, but almost like medicine for the soul, because it really took those feelings that you have when you have grief, and yeah, it just really hit home for me. So that was like my number 19 book, I guess. And then I have a couple of children's books on my list this year. I guess number 18 would be uh Scottish Folktales for Children. My mom picked this up for me in Scotland when she was visiting, and it was just so magical. Lots of folk tales in it, about the Fae specifically, but it really brought home all of like the magical feelings that I had of the Fae and wanting to read these folk tales when I was really young. Like, I really wanted like folktale stories when I was young. I looked for them. I even looked in encyclopedias for anything when I was little. And this really filled that missing set of stories that I needed, and I absolutely adored it. The next story that I have that was more of a child story was Silver Swift. And this one was one of my 5-star reads of the year. So this is like one of my absolute favorites of the year. Even though I say it's number 17, it's like absolutely one of my favorites. It was about a girl and her grandmother who were on the journey to find mermaids. And if you know me, I absolutely love mermaids and folklore and all of that. And it was really beautifully written. It was like reading art because of the way the author described certain things. It was just beautiful. And it really painted a wonderful, magical picture in my mind when I was reading. And also, the characters were really well written. And let's see, what else? It just really was a perfect summer read. And even if it was a children's book, it still was really entertaining as a 32-year-old adult. Silver Swift was written by Natalie Lloyd. If you're wanting to look it up, I highly recommend it. Like I was saying, it was just a magical experience, and I just loved it. It was perfect. It had adventure, it had folklore, it had just beautiful artistic way of writing all these things too. So yeah, that I guess is my number 17, but actually it's like one of my tops of the year. I'm just trying to categorize these into specific genres. Okay, so then my next set of genre, my next genre is like the fictional dystopian novels. Was Morningstar. Actually read the entire Red Rising series. Red Rising, if you're unfamiliar with it, is kind of like an adult version of the Hunger Games, if that makes sense. But it's it's different than the Hunger Games, I guess I should say, because I don't really like it being compared to the Hunger Games, but it's similar but very different at the same time, if that makes sense. It's written by Pierce Brown, and it follows a young man, and he is basically living in the lower castes of society, and due to something terrible that happens to him, he is trying to create a better life for everyone, I guess, because this whole story is about these different castes of people, and they all have specific jobs and specific way of living, and a lot of them don't know about each other, so that they're kept ignorant so that they don't uprise. And anyway, it is a fantastic novel series. But I picked Morningstar, which was the third book, because I felt like it wrapped up everything wonderfully. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of pain that the characters go through. And it was just a fantastic series all the way around. So if you haven't read the Red Rising series, I recommend it. And I'm looking forward to picking up the next few books that kind of go along with the series. I think there might be 2 more. I thought it was originally a trilogy because it does wrap up in Morningstar. But I saw that there was a couple more listed under Red Rising, so I'll have to look into that a little more maybe this year. Great series, like I was saying. The next dystopian book that I really enjoyed, so I guess this is 14 now, 14, was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And this is written by Suzanne Collins, and it was a prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. And if you're a fan of the Hunger Games trilogy, then I would recommend it. It follows President Snow's life from when he was going through his own trials. And it's awful because you don't want to like his character, and then there's some moments where you're like, oh, I kind of like his character, and then you're kind of sympathizing with this horrible, horrible, awful person, and then you see those horrible, awful moments in his younger life as well. So it's just really interesting. I love the Hunger Games series when I read it, and I was really excited to see more of that world. But yeah, I do recommend it if you're a fan of the Hunger Games trilogy. If you're not, then you probably wouldn't be into it. So don't waste your time. But I really enjoyed it, and I was excited about it. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next genre. Okay, our next genre is like mystery, thriller, suspense. In no particular order. So I guess this would be number 14 or 13. I've already lost track. I'm horrible. I should have written it down. But anyway, this one would be Thorwood House by Anna Romer, I believe is who the author is. I did another vlog on this recently this month. It's about a woman who's trying to discover the past of this family's history of this place that she inherited, and there was a murder, and she's trying to figure out who murdered this wonderful woman, and she's trying to solve it because it's basically her daughter's family history, and she gets extremely involved, and she only inherited it after her ex-husband supposedly killed himself, and she's trying to figure out why he did it because he wasn't that type of person. She's also trying to figure out why he basically abandoned his child and basically left the family unit, and why he didn't give the home to his current wife, and what happened in their family history. This grandfather of her daughter supposedly killed his wife, and she's trying to figure out all of that while discovering that there is someone else that seems to be following them. And it's a very suspenseful novel. I read it super quick because I couldn't handle just waiting. But yeah, I loved it. I recommend it. And just like an honorable mention, if you love this book, Thorwood House, I recommend you read Beneath the Shadows. I just recently did a little reflection vlog on that as well, and I uploaded it. It's in the December wrap-up, so if you want to hear more about that, definitely check that out. It's kind of like an honorable mention because it still has the same kind of vibes. But yeah, check this one out for sure. Next mystery suspense thriller novel I really enjoyed was Last Girl Gone by J.G. Heatherton. I believe that's who it is. Anyway, it follows a young reporter who recently was fired from her huge news reporting job because she did something questionable, and she goes back home to her little town, and she catches wind of these disappearances of these girls, and she wants to solve this kind of cold case because something happened that seems like it's going to start again. And yeah, this one was heart pounding for me. It was super fast. Love the twists and turns in it. Yeah, it's a series. I think it's the Laura Chambers series, and this is the first book. I got it for free on Audible. So I definitely will be picking up the second book, I believe anyway. Hopefully soon I'll find it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing. It was extremely suspenseful. And it didn't hold back either. I really enjoyed the story. The next mystery that I highly recommend as one of my top mysteries of the year was Distress Signals by Catherine Ryan Howard, I believe is what her name was. It follows a man in his recent success as a screenplay writer, and his girlfriend, basically like his fiance, goes missing and he doesn't know what to do. So he tracks her movements. She's supposed to be at a conference for work, but it turns out she lied about that and is possibly having an affair, and that obviously devastates him because they had been in a really long-term relationship. They were living together and basically married in his eyes. So he goes on to try and figure out what happened to her. Is she missing because she wants to go missing on her own accord, or is she missing because something nefarious happened to her? Anyway, his search takes him to a cruise ship, and I have always been fascinated with cruise ships because there are so many crimes that happen on cruise ships because it's easier, it seems like, to get away with certain things on a cruise. Anyway, I found the story fascinating because it goes into all of those different loopholes and technicalities of cruise ship crimes. Anyway, I really love this one. I highly recommend it, and I would definitely be picking up another story by this author. Another mystery, thriller, suspense novel that I read this year was When You Find Me by P.J. Vernon. This story followed a young woman, and she seems like she is extremely unhappy with her life. One night her husband goes missing, and the car that they rented is found on the side of the road. He was seen the night before getting into a tussle with a man that was flirting with an old flame of his wife, basically. And eventually the police get involved to figure out what happened to this man. There's a lot of twists and turns in this story as well. The girl gets phone calls from someone that might have seen what was going on. Seems to know a lot of details about her husband and about her. She doesn't know who she is. She's wondering if she might be part of an affair. But yeah, extremely interesting. I love the twists and turns in it. Highly recommend it. Check it out. Great mystery novel. Another favorite thriller, suspense novel, mystery novel that I read was The Bullet by Mary Louise Kelly. A young woman finds that the source of her pain is a bullet that has been in her spine for who knows how long, because she doesn't even remember being shot. This leads her to find out more about who she was as a person, and to find out that her parents weren't really her parents and that she was adopted. So the whole story is basically about finding her parents' murderer or murderers, and basically figuring out who she is and who is aware that she has become aware that her parents were murdered and that she's trying to piece it together. This one was extremely interesting for me as well. I read it really quick. Really recommend it. very suspenseful, very interesting, and yeah, highly satisfied. This one's more of like a thriller. It was The Chemist by Stephenie Meyer. I really enjoyed the story. It follows a ex-government official who was kind of like hitman for hire. She created, I guess, chemicals to help extract information from people that they were questioning. One day, one day she finds that they're trying to basically take her out because she knows too much, and the story grows from there. She's trying to find a way to survive these people, and also they reach out to her saying if she does a certain thing that they will basically leave her alone. There's action, there's romance, and there is just a lot of, I guess, suspense to what's going to happen to these characters. I felt like they were really likable characters, and I grew to love them. So I was kind of sad that there was only one book, but the story was told very well in one book, and I really recommend this story. Okay, so I guess we're going to go ahead and get into the romance, my favorite romance stories of the year. Let's start with the Silhouette Shadows anthology. Basically, it is a set of 3 stories that are 3 different romance stories, and they kind of deal with a darker side of romance, is what the tagline says. Okay, one of the stories deals with a woman who goes to her beach cabin, her family's beach cabin, and she discovers some history of her grandparents, and she finds a young man on the beach that looks like a man that she's been dreaming about, and she doesn't know why. She seems to have known him in the past in her dreams. She thinks she's having like past life flashbacks in these dreams, and this man shows up and he looks exactly like the man in her dreams, and she's freaking out. And yeah, so there's that one. And then there's another story that talks about a beachside retreat, and she happens to get herself in a bad situation. The people there are very sketchy and always seem to me to be stalking her. And she meets this man that they seem to keep trying to push on her. Anyway, really creepy story. I really enjoyed it. And then the last story was about a woman who was evading like a hit for hire. This man abducts her, and he said he's trying to protect her, and he's dressed as the Phantom of the Opera. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and it got me reading a bunch of random Silhouette Shadows romance stories as well. So I really look fondly on this anthology of stories that took place next to the beach. It was a perfect beach read. Yeah, and then the next romance story that I really enjoyed was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Wong, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name right. It was about a woman who has autism, and basically this man is helping her. Well, she hires a man to help her with her relationships. And I just related a lot to the main character. It just really hit home. And this is actually the only book I cried at, because I felt really connected to the main character, and I thought she was written really well. And I was happy that that I was able to see some similar thoughts in this character. And yeah, I really connected with it. I thought it was a fantastic story. It totally made me cry for reasons that weren't really written in the story, but just because I could connect to this character. And I'm extremely excited to read more characters written from this kind of point of view of someone who has autism. So yeah, I really liked it. It was a great story, and the male lead was just, yes, amazing. I would definitely read this story again. Okay, and then I read the ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses series for the first time this year. And the series is written by Sarah J. Maas, and this is my first experience with Sarah J. Maas. The entire series is just absolutely amazing. A little bit cheesy, but I could not stop reading it. Like, I read one book and then I picked up the next one and I picked up the next one and I couldn't stop until I was done. So I'm really looking forward to the next part in the story. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Great characters. If you're unfamiliar with ACOTAR, basically it follows a young woman named Feyre, and she happens to be abducted by a fae, and she is kept there, and it's this kind of like Beauty and the Beast story where she is kept there and he is kind of hoping that she will fall in love with him. But there's a lot of twists and turns in the story, and it was, I don't know, beautifully written. I really liked it, and I enjoyed so many of the characters in the story. They just kind of became a part of like my absolute favorite characters of all time, and it made me want to read a little bit more fantasy, because this is more of a fantasy story. It's just romance with fantasy. But yeah, loved it. Highly recommend it. Super excited by the new release here coming soon. Okay, let's go ahead and get into like the horror-ish genre. So one of my favorites in the horror that I've read, in the horror genre that I've read this year, was Nightmare Soup. And Nightmare Soup is kind of like a collection of short stories, and it's kind of more along the lines of like children's story, like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. A lot of creepy, spooky little things in there, and I just absolutely adored it. The illustrations are everything. It is very much like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So if you want something that's kind of reminiscent of that, definitely pick up Nightmare Soup. It is just absolutely beautiful. Beautiful artwork. Super creepy. The next story that I loved in the horror genre, the next I guess anthology that I enjoyed in the horror genre was The Devil in the Deep. And The Devil in the Deep is basically a series of stories that involve the ocean, or I guess the sea is basically what the main focus is. So it's perfect for reading in the summer if you want something spooky and short. All these little stories deal with different aspects of the ocean and ocean horror. So like we have ships, we have monsters, we have mermaids, we have anything that you can think of that could be turned into horror is in this story. And since I absolutely love the ocean and I love horror, it was the perfect mix of the two. So I highly recommend The Devil in the Deep. Definitely pick it up. If you want something that's a little more haunting and memorable, pick up The Haunted by Bentley Little. This story is kind of like a supernatural ghost story, and it is about a family who lives in this house, and spooky, awful things start happening to them. it had a lot of like American Horror Story vibes and like Amityville Horror vibes to it. But there were some like stomach churning scenes in there that will haunt me forever. Just, it was very well done, and it's very rare that like a supernatural ghost thriller story will keep my attention like this one did, but it was super spooky and I highly recommend it. And I think this is the last, no, it's not the last one. One of the last ones in the horror genre that I liked was Fantasyland is a story about something that was horrific that took place in an amusement park, kind of like Disneyland. Basically, it was a story of people who were stuck in this amusement park after a huge hurricane and weren't able to be rescued right away because people who were in charge of the amusement park basically said that people were trained for these kinds of situations and that there was enough food. And since it was a huge like hurricane that affected more than one like place, the rescue services were dispersed in more urgent areas, I guess. So they kind of thought, oh well, they'll be fine because they have all this stuff and they have all this training. Well, it wasn't really like that. They started breaking up into different sects, and it was very much like Lord of the Flies or The Purge. If you're into those stories, you will be into Fantasyland. Yeah, very creepy and just horrific and brutal. There were some really brutal scenes in the story that just crazy. Love it. But I did a more thorough review on this recently, so I won't go too much into it. But yeah, love it. Absolutely recommend it. And definitely one of my favorites of the year. And my absolute favorite story of the year is a horror suspense thriller, I guess. It is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It follows a young woman who gets a disturbing letter from her cousin, I believe. It's been a while since I read it. And she decides to go over to her house and see what's going on. And she starts discovering these oddities in this family home. And she is trying to determine whether or not this family that her cousin has married into is good for her or not, or if they're trying to get rid of her and kill her or make her seem like she's crazy. But like I said, this story was written in such a way that like it evoked so many different emotional responses from me. It was so spooky. It was written so beautifully. The writing style, I cannot praise it enough. I just absolutely adored the writing style. And I really enjoyed all the characters and the mystery behind what was going on with the cousin. And I just really enjoyed how all the characters were written and just the writing style. It just felt like a nightmare when I was reading it. And I appreciate stories that make me feel like I'm in a nightmare, if that makes sense. But it was my absolute favorite, and I'm excited to pick up more stories by her. I hear that she writes very differently in each novel, though, so I'll be interested to see her writing style evolve. And yeah, I hope you guys liked my 20 favorite books of 2020, and if you've read any of these, let me know what you think of them, and let me know what you think of how I feel about them. If you're interested in any of these books, definitely let me know which ones you might be picking up this year. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.